Hey guys, what is up? It's Dusty here and welcome back to another episode of the Daily Crypto News. And I just saw this article. Watch the Fed Chair Powell talk live about the economy interest rates at the ECB forum. I actually watched a part of it yesterday, but one of the most important takes for sure out of that video was this right here. Smaller countries flock to CBDC to prevent dollarization. This came again out of the ECB forum. It stated here at the ECB forum yesterday, one of the topics was the impact of digitalization and central bank digital currencies on monetary sovereignty. The currencies of the major economies will become even more dominant in this digital era, and that scares the heck out of smaller countries and emerging economies, said Markus Brunnemeyer, Princeton professor and advisor to the BIS and Bundesbank. That's why they're all at the forefront of introducing CBDCs in order to defend their currencies from the sovereign currencies taken over. And you know what I find ironical about that? What did Ripple just release exactly one day before this very important ECB forum meeting? Yes, one day before that meeting, or maybe 2 days actually, they said, today, we're launching the CBDC Innovate Challenge with a total prize pool of a lousy 200,000. Pretty low in my own opinion, but okay. Participants will use our XRP Ledger's CBDC sandbox to drive financial inclusion, interoperability, and retail payment solutions. Initial round submissions due August 25th. Isn't that kind of funny though, guys? Isn't that kind of funny? Very important meeting on, the 29th, I think. And then the 27th, they let go of such an interesting Innovate Challenge. I just thought that was a cool little coincidence. And we've actually, for the last 2 weeks here or so, been showing Ripple's 2024 site. It's been crazy. We had it with the Metaverse realm. They announced a really important partnership a couple of days before some really big things happen in the Metaverse, some big coalition, I guess. And it could go on for a little bit, but let's just move on with some more crypto news. Former Coinbase executives gives an unusual indication in Ripple SEC lawsuit. Former Coinbase board member Tom Lavero gives an unusual indication on the Ripple SEC lawsuit, referring to the statements made by Ripple's CEO on leaving the US once it loses its case against the SEC. Alright? Lavero feels things don't look so good, even though he has no concrete information on this just quite yet. So let's take a look on this. Crypto winter is here. I was on the Coinbase board until 2021 and led its Series D for IVP. I've lived crypto cycles since 2013. Here are my predictions on how and when this crypto winter will end and how to emerge stronger. Ripple CEO Garlinghouse was quoted to have said during the Collision conference in Toronto that if Ripple loses, they might consider leaving the US. And Jeremy Whitler said, any thoughts if Ripple beats the SEC? Does it change anything? And Tom said, I have zero real info, but I don't think it looks good for old Ripple if they're already talking about leaving the US. What? So here they're trying to state that Ripple is acting as if they've already lost. There's a couple of really important things to, I guess we can extrapolate this into saying, well, it's not really a sign of you think you're going to lose if you talk about failure necessarily. I mean, there's a big crowd watching this, but more importantly, well, they are literally fighting a fight, which is a ridiculously uphill battle, and they are portraying and showcasing already the US is the odd one out. In all of these statements, what they always state is that most countries in the world are accepting XRP/Ripple for what they do and don't think it's a security. If the US, all right, and this is very important, if the US decides to be the odd one out, enforce their rules in a crazy manner that nobody seems to understand, if the SEC really wants to hammer things down and the judge apparently buys into it, well, they're ready to accept faith in the US, agree to disagree with the United States, to accept basically that it's fallen and move over to a country that's more accepting towards crypto. Is it an option of failure? Always. Is it bad to acknowledge failure as an option? I would highly disagree, mostly on the part that they're fighting an uphill battle. And the chance of failure is surely there, mostly on the perspective that, well, the SEC really highly doesn't like to agree with them, and there's no rules for this. It's making new rules. And if the judge didn't know anything about, I guess, internet, let's put it like that, there would have been a 98% chance that Ripple would just straight up got the stamp security because they don't understand. Now, this judge is really willing to read themselves in on it, but there's still a chance that they don't understand the concept of decentralization enough, for example, to actually get some proper rules going. Do I think it will be subverted, or how do you say it? Like, changed up eventually. I think if Ripple were to appeal, then eventually the decision would be made where it's going to get overthrown and Ripple would eventually be fine. But on the short term, it's a really difficult concept. And so even though I think they'll win because that's logic, you don't know how the legal system in the US is going to take this one. I'm personally quite convinced Ripple will win, most based upon everything that we've covered over the last couple of months, right? A lot of the SC arguments don't make a lot of sense. A lot of it is showcasing that they're just doing this for the freaking money or status or just because it was an easier target. Then again, it doesn't seem like they're really sturdy in their shoes. And we can go on about that for a couple of hours, but let's just move on to some more crypto news. Again, the Coinbase executive also shared, the ex-Coinbase executive, when he thinks it's going to be over. He said, in 2022, crypto will go even lower. 2023 will be mostly flat to down until indifference sets in, signaling a long-awaited spring thaw. Explained below. Crypto macro will improve in the second half of 2023. And all I can say about the situation is I'm buying the freaking dip. It doesn't really matter when exactly crypto starts to pump back up. Nobody really knows. However, if we look at halving cycles, it might take a little while. Pantera Capital says it is long-term bullish on crypto, but more meltdowns might come in the next couple of months. And that's something you should just accept. If there's a big recession coming on in, crypto can surely go down further. I've accepted that as truth, and I think so should you. But more importantly in that nature, well, long term, I think just stacking up your sats, stacking up your altcoins, everything is fine. Short term, it's hard. But once you get through the bitterness, you'll find the juicy, sweet stuff. Really, I've been here for such a long time. I've been here for maybe 8 or 9 years almost already. It's crazy. From that perspective, I'm thinking, man, my entire portfolio has had such a roller coaster over the last decade. There's a very good chance it's going to keep doing that. And I'm all up for it. That's the best way I can describe it, I guess. We also saw MicroStrategy, Michael Saylor buy another huge amount of Bitcoin. I mean, actually 500 Bitcoin, I guess, is not that huge, but $10 million. I mean, if you say it like that, it's not a lot of money for such a big company, but it's a lot of money. Their average price at this point is 30.6 thousand, so they're down about 50%, which is pretty crazy if you start to think about it. But the fact they're still buying and still believing in it could either be crazy ignorance, but I don't believe so, right? I think it's just this idea of crypto will do well over longer periods of time that just averaging out is going to be completely fine. There's also Peter Schiff, by the way. He blasts MicroStrategy's latest Bitcoin purchase, says Bitcoin more downside would make Saylor waste more money. Again, I highly doubt that. You might think about it like, oh, it's a loan, so it's all bad. As long as he doesn't have to pay back the loan, or at least he's able to do so in the right increments in the right time, it's all fine. He says, so MicroStrategy is down 1.4 billion on Bitcoin, yet you continue to average down, throwing not so good money after incredibly bad. I was sure that, but I'm not sure what I''s means. I'm sure, whatever, that, but for your buying Bitcoin price would be lower. But now that you've done, the decline can resume until you waste more money buying again. I guess he's just a bit salty. Let him speak though, right? Let him speak. Anybody that's been in the crypto space for a little while knows he's a very big skeptic, a very big critic. Yeah, take it with a grain of salt is what I do. On the other side of things, there's actually some interesting stuff happening as well. Celsius apparently had double the risk profile of traditional banks, a report says. The crypto lender reportedly made significantly under-collateralized loans and illiquid investments, leaving only a small buffer in the case of downturn. And to explain this, it is not as if they, by definition, made bad investments. Illiquid investments could, for example, be, let's say that I deposit $1 billion into a bank, just a casual deposit, like I do every week. If this bank now locks up my money for example, 7 years, well, that's fine if there's a lot of money flowing in and I don't want to withdraw, for example. If a lot of money is flowing in and I want to, for example, withdraw only $1 million, well, then I could use the $1 million that just came in, kind of like a Ponzi scheme in a certain sense, from another person to pay me back for the time being. This could also work if, for example, I invested that for only 1 month, because at that point, if I decide to withdraw it, well, they can, for the short term, pay me back with some other ones, but very shortly, the money that they invested for such a long time will be available again to pay out the initial investors, for example, on another side that at some point paid me back. So the reason it's officially, it kind of looks like a Ponzi scheme, the whole banking system, you start explaining like that. But so the loaning situation can be described in a couple of manners, but one of the ones to explain it is just, let's say you are borrowing something, that's completely fine and sure, you give up collateral for that. But let's say hypothetically, there's a couple scenarios which you can think of, but let's say you get a really big loan. Well, that's by definition risk, because now you have the obligation to pay it back. But let's say that something in the midst happens. maybe you don't have enough money to pay it back or something, well, things just start to fall apart. And in the crypto space, that happens a lot quicker. Let's say you, for example, use the loan to buy some Bitcoin and the Bitcoin price goes down really hard. It could also, however, be that they actually loaned out money to people, and those guys, they were accepting just under collateralization. That means that, for example, somebody wanted to borrow $10,000, but they only put $5,000 down. Then if they just decided to forfeit, don't give the money back, well, you got the $5,000, but they're left with $10,000, if you guys get my drift. So it says here, before it raised new funds last summer, the lender's assets to equity ratio was reportedly 19-1, almost double that of the average US bank. Documents seen by Wall Street Journal also allegedly revealed that Celsius sold under collateralized loans and re-hypothecating the posted collateral. So yeah, that's some very shady business. And this is again, guys, why FTX founder Sam Bankman-Fried is now saying a lot of exchanges are in a lot more trouble than you might think. Even with Celsius, who expected them to be in this position? With traditional banks, they get bailed out rather quickly. With crypto banks, it's a lot more private in that nature, so some guy has to be willing to suck it all up for the industry, or because they really think they can turn around with this injection, like Sam Bankman-Fried. But he's also already explaining they're not going to be able to save every exchange, everybody, every lending platform, so a lot of them will fail because, well, if there's a bank run, if people start to try to get their money and they locked it up for the next couple of years, very often what exchanges, or I guess what lending platforms and whatnot do, is they invest in new cryptos, for example. But let's say they were investing where these tokens were going to launch in the next 6 to 9 months. That's fine as long as things are going up. But the more that things start to fall down, a lot of the tokens which were going to launch, which were going to make you tens of times your money or hundreds of times your money, well, either they launch and fail because things are really bad, or they decide to extend their launch. That means that your money might be stuck for the next 2 years. And the same thing could hypothetically go for the private rounds of companies, or the seed rounds, I should say, where you're just sometimes stuck without being able to move your money for a little bit. And that might be a couple months, couple years, but in a time where there's a bank run, that's a significant amount of time. At the end of the day, though, guys, we know crypto is moving on rather quickly. Another ETP, another ETF over in Switzerland just got announced. And there's actually a fun story, which I have about ETFs that's coming out later, as Grayscale, lawsuit, all right, lawsuit. So I'm going to cover that later in a video today. If you guys are excited for that, make sure you press that like button. In general, if you enjoy the crypto videos, I always appreciate you guys pressing that like button. Subscribing, you only have to do that if you think you want to come back more often. But liking always helps. That's about it. See ya.